education now all of a sudden are totally disinterested in test results. You just never see them talked about, right? And when I bring them up, you know, I'm the devil there. They totally don't want to talk about it, right? And it's like, well, like I said, our school board president sends their kids somewhere else.
Well, I appreciate you being here. My time's expired, but I would think that rising student achievement would be something that could unite people, even of different political persuasions, and the things that diminish that achievement should be dealt with and not just accepted as a cost of doing business. But thank you very much for your testimony. I yield back.
Thank you.
Now recognize the representative from California for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Sheriff Schmidt, a few weeks ago, Tulare County Sheriff Mike Boudreau testified before this committee that the Sinaloa cartel has already sunk deep roots into his county in California. Their activities include the murder of cartel opponents, rampant extortion of small businesses, and criminal activities that include drug and human trafficking. He testified that the cartel was so well organized that they'd actually divided the state into regions with their own regional units, including assassination units. He's fighting the Sinaloa cartel in California, and you're waging the same battle 1,500 miles away in Wisconsin. Tell us about the Sinaloa cartel that this administration has deliberately allowed into our communities.
Well, I'm hopeful that we don't get to the point of where California is. I think right now we have it to a point under control here in Wisconsin, as far as there's only a few of them, and they haven't gotten to the point of what you're seeing in California. But obviously, if we don't take action when we make the initial arrest and we just let them go into the wind and continue their operations, that's going to enable the leaders of the cartel to say, look, they're not doing anything to us in Wisconsin. What can we do now because they let us get away?
If we continue down this road another 4 years, what do you anticipate?
I anticipate we'll have additional, just like we're seeing across the country with the Tren de Aragua. We're going to see this happen here as well with this cartel.
Now, what kind of crimes are they responsible for? I mean, these are not exactly Rotary Club recruits.
Right. No, these are individuals that in our areas we're seeing fentanyl overdose, fentanyl distribution, methamphetamine distribution, pushing drugs. That's what we're seeing right now. Obviously, that grows as they become more prevalent in our communities. Right now, we are concerned because we don't want more families like you heard from here today. And that's what we're going to see if that continues.
We're seeing some 300 a day, I'm told, on average across the country. Sheriff Boudreau estimated that fully half of the crime that he's now dealing with is due to illegal migrants. A few weeks before that, NYPD officials estimated that about 75% of the crime that they're now dealing with in Manhattan is due to illegal migrants. What percentage of the crimes would you estimate that you're dealing with are now due to illegal migrants in your county?
I believe it's growing. It's a much lower rate yet. We still have hope here. I think we're probably in the 20% range, 15 to 20, but it's growing.
How rapidly has this condition developed?
Over the last 4 years is when it really has started to rear its ugly head. Before that, we had slow incremental growth. There's been that growth. But over the last 4 years, it's really exploded, and we're seeing it especially in the drug area.
Sheriff Boudreau testified that according to his discussions with his counterparts across the country, the problems that he was describing in his own county and that you've described in yours are becoming typical of communities throughout America. Have you discussed this with other sheriffs, and what are they saying?
As I said earlier, yeah, we've talked about it. I asked the other sheriffs for examples, and there was no shortage of supply of examples across our state of these various types of crimes. And in my neighboring county of Columbia County, he couldn't break it down into individuals. He just said, there's a bunch of these various types of sexual assaults. We're seeing a lot of sexual assault types crimes, things that you would never accept here. It's almost like part of their culture. We're seeing the sexual assaults and the drug offenses, homicides, scams across the variety of all the different crimes that we see. They're pushing it here.
Mr. Curtis, what we seem to be seeing is that illegal migrants concentrate in very large numbers in very short periods of time in small towns and then completely overwhelm those local communities. So a lot of communities haven't faced this yet. but for those that do, the effects are devastating. What would you say to those communities that have not yet seen this influx into their towns and neighborhoods?
Great question, sir. Unfortunately, a lot of this does come down to resources. As we've heard from a school district standpoint, you need to be prepared if you're going to see this influx of ESL students. But frankly, I would argue it even goes, unfortunately, beyond that, right? A lot of the school resource officers in Whitewater, according to the emails that we reviewed, really spend a significant amount of their time simply doing home visits to identify, why students aren't attending. The truancy rates have significantly increased in the district. So these are really basic issues, almost operational issues that school districts have to be prepared for. And obviously, the sheriff and the district attorney have noted some of the law enforcement concerns.
So if it hasn't come to your community, it's going to, if this continues. And if it's in your community, it's going to grow if this continues. Is that essentially what the two of you are telling me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Gentleman yields. I'll recognize the gentleman from Oregon for his questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank the panel for being here. Kamala Harris just a little over a month ago made a statement regarding violence against women, and she was stating this on the anniversary of the Violence Against Women Act, and at the end of her statement she says, as we reflect on the life-changing progress we've made over the past 30 years, we recommit to the critical work ahead together alongside survivors, advocates, allies. President Biden and I will continue to do everything in our power to ensure that every woman throughout America has freedom to live safe from violence and hate. She said that, and yet at the same time the Biden administration has allowed 1/3 of the folks that came across the border are from Central America. Let me read this. Gender-based violence in Latin America has the highest rate. Latin America has the highest rate of gender-based violence in the world, according to the Wilson Center. 1/3 of the folks that came in, the 6 million, 2 million, are from Central America. And so we hear President Trump state that folks from south of the border are rapists. He was speaking in, obviously, generalities. But the specific point was made the other day in front of our Judiciary Committee by April Aguirre, who came in and talked, a crime victim advocate, saying how the attitude toward women in Central America is horrible. The question to you, Sheriff, is how in the world, when we have people that come in where women are second-class citizens in many respects, and you can look it up, Google it, in these countries, how in the world are we going to do something about it now that we have all these folks from those areas here? And this is real, and this was brought home to us in graphic detail by Ms. Aguirre in front of our committee just 2 months ago. And she was disdainful of the assertion that somehow we could fix this. And she was pointing at the culture in Central America. And I hate to be saying that everybody from that country is that way. I'm sure they are not. But definitely there is that attitude, and you can look it up. Gender inequality is rampant there. I don't know why the Biden administration is busy saying it's doing everything for women when it's allowing this kind of thing to happen. Well, here we are. And as I asked the senator, what are we going to do about it? Sheriff, I don't expect you to have all the answers, but I went back and forth on whether to ask the school board member what to do about it, because it seems like a training thing. But in your opinion, what do you think?
Well, I can say I don't have the resources. I don't have the resources to do what we need to do about it. You take a look at the issues that we have about that 12-year-old girl that was almost sexually assaulted, in the process of being sexually assaulted, just north of our county line that I talked about earlier. You talk about the sexual assaults that we hear about all the time. You hear about the human trafficking, whether it be sex trafficking or labor trafficking. These are very real issues. I don't have the resources. I have 7 detectives for my county of 900 square miles, and I don't have the resources to do that. It's going to take a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of resources. It's going to take the community to come together to be able to do this.
And
I don't have the answer.
and you're speaking at how are we going to protect people now that we are in this situation? In that regard, we had a situation in Southern Oregon where a cartel member was raising huge quantities of marijuana. Southern Oregon is a wonderful place to grow it, and many, many people are there doing it illegally. And Watermaster went down to try to shut off the water that they were stealing for their marijuana grow. And the head of the cartel running that particular girl came up to him with an AK-47 and said, "You can't do anything to me because I'm invisible. I'm invisible." So my question to you is, was he right? Was that cartel member right? Because when they do a raid, people scatter into the woods. There's no way to find them. So my question to you is, are you encountering that same thing, and is the response, you need more help? What is the response?
I think you're dead on. They do become invisible. We don't know who they are. We can't track them down. I think you're spot on. I think it's it becomes more and more difficult for us we even have a picture of somebody. I can't put a name with them because we don't have a proper identification for them. And I think you're spot on. And we need a lot more resources, and we need to know who these people are and what they represent and what their background is.
Thank you. I am struck by what, again, the senator was pointing out is this huge problem that we now have, and how in the world do we deal with it? And it looks as if one of the ways is going to be to encourage and support law enforcement more. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman yields, and I recognize one of the gentlemen from Wisconsin, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Rockwell, Rick, and Aaron, thank you for being here today. Because of the networks you described earlier that you've been able to develop and the conversations you've had with other parents that unfortunately have suffered what you have gone through, and you talked about kind of the elected officials maybe getting more involved or doing specific things. What are some of those things that you could relay kind of to the full committee today that you see would be, clearly things that need to be done and done as quickly as possible?
Sure. Again, our main focus is the education and awareness. So one of the things would be making sure that these young children in our country are educated at an earlier age, or educated at all, and not leaving it up to the families of the victims to do that work. Having some mandated education on, this, as a foundation, Aaron and I and our members are not going to stop the flow of fentanyl. We can only do as much as we can with the education and awareness. So that's one of the big things that would help us.
You have a relationship, I'm sure you do, with law enforcement, and were there things that maybe happened on campus and that were repeated that you think could be avoided? Maybe more awareness, or what are some of the strategies you think that could work?
Sure, definitely. And one of the big things that I mentioned too was the stigma. So we get a lot of resistance when we talk to schools or talk to like the university. When we first started talking to the university after Logan passed away, we didn't realize that there was this big need for this awareness until 9 months later, when another young man, Cade, passed away from the same pill. And we asked the university, was anything done? They didn't even. There was no awareness made to any of the kids. So there needs to be. They get alerts when there's a storm coming. These kids need to know that these dangers are out there. And you hear about bad batches and stuff, but there's no bad batches anymore. Fentanyl is just bad at all together. So they just need this awareness. And so one of the things that happened with us talking to the school is they are now more receptive. They have gotten Narcan installed, which I'm not going to get into that, but that through our efforts and other nonprofits, we've gotten Narcan installed in primarily all the UW campuses in Wisconsin. So that's a great thing. Just knowing the signs, getting that education. Now at UWM, they're having education in their orientation. So they're actually talking about it when the kids first come into school. So those are the things we need. It's just that awareness. I know it's not going to 100% get rid of the issue, but that would help.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. And I do apologize too. Congressman Tiffany asked me the question about talking to the law enforcement earlier, and my nerves just got to me. But I did want to. We do work with the DEA in Washington,
right? And
the question was brought to me about how, the flow of fentanyl, and I did want to bring this up because I felt bad because I kind of froze up. But if I'm correct with my numbers, just in 2023, the DEA confiscated almost 80 million fentanyl pills, and almost 30,000 pounds of fentanyl powder. That's almost 15 tons. So if you equate that back to the 2 milligrams that's considered a lethal dose, that's like 6.5 billion doses that could kill. I mean, million lethal doses. So I'm sorry, 6.5 billion doses.
Okay, I'm going to ask the DA kind of the more technical aspect of this. Right now, we've had a bill the last two Congresses to actually label fentanyl as a Schedule I narcotic. That bill is not passed, which is just simply unbelievable to me at this point. And if you talk to people, members of Congress, they're amazed by this too, why we can't get this done. From a DEA's perspective, how do you view crimes or certainly anything related to a Schedule I narcotic? And do you think it would make a difference when it comes to prosecuting some of these crimes related to fentanyl?
I think it definitely has the opportunity to help. We know the danger that fentanyl is and just how potent it is, and it's taken very seriously. But once you start putting drugs into that Schedule I category, that certainly gives us more tools, and we'll take any tools that you're able to give us that can help us prosecute these cases.
Gentleman yields, and now recognize Mr. Van Orden for his questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hey, Sheriff, thanks for coming out. Thank you for your work. I appreciate it greatly. I think across the board, we recognize the fact that this is a abject failure on the federal government's part like no other, directly relating to Vice President Harris's bore czardom. I think we can just agree with that. And again, I want to thank Mr. Pocan and Ms. Moore for coming to this incredibly vital hearing that has affected tens of thousands of Wisconsinites on a daily basis. So actually, I just think that's pathetic. They couldn't bother to find time in their day to come here to talk about this issue that's killing our citizens. Sheriff, have you been given any guidance from the Evers State House about how you should be dealing with this illegal alien issue that we're having here for reporting or money or anything at all?
The Evers administration has not communicated with me much at all. I've attempted several times, both as the sheriff and as the president of Badger Sheriffs, to have open communications, but my attempts have gone to interns, and it's taken weeks and months before I even get a return call from anybody. There is zero communication between me and the Evers administration.
All right, so put it into context for folks that aren't from Wisconsin. You're the head of the Badger Sheriffs Association. You're one of 72 sheriffs, the most senior constitutionally elected law enforcement official in your county, correct?
That's correct.
And the governor of the state of Wisconsin has not contacted you about an issue that's been killing hundreds, if not thousands, of Wisconsinites for years now?
He has not contacted me, and he's been very scarce to most sheriffs in the state.
Okay. District Attorney Tony, have you been given any guidance by the mighty Josh Call about how you should be handling this issue with Wisconsinites being brutally kidnapped, raped, murdered, and poisoned?
So we, as district attorneys, are independent from the Department of Justice as far as how we prosecute cases. Yep. One of the challenges that we face in cases when we're trying to get evidence tested is limits on what we can now send to the crime labs run by the Department of Justice and slower turnaround times in some of those categories that there was recently a study by the Legislative Audit Bureau where of the judges that responded, I think the number was north of 60 or 70% that were having to reschedule cases because they didn't have test results. That was slowing down cases that we're having in court, which bottles things up, delays justice, and makes it more difficult for prosecutors in the courtrooms.
So, Mr. District Attorney, could you say that District Attorney Josh Call has an understanding that there's a fentanyl issue in the state of Wisconsin?
I would have to believe that he has an understanding of that. There may be some, I think, stark differences in how some of us would look to combat that compared to his approach.
So we can reasonably assume that the sitting Attorney General for the state of Wisconsin is aware that there's a fentanyl crisis with the citizens in the state of Wisconsin. We can also reasonably assume that he has some contact with law enforcement. And if law enforcement on both sides wearing the suit and wearing the badge are saying exactly the same thing to you, but Governor Evers and Josh Call refuse to do anything about this fentanyl crisis, what does that say about Governor Evers and Josh Call?
Well, it's disappointing when we don't see some of those resources that we need. The types of cases that are coming through are getting more complicated, that are taking more and more time just to review it for charging, to make sure that we're getting justice for families, because not every family is even going to have a case make it to the courtroom if they lost a loved one to fentanyl overdose.
So, Sheriff, when someone calls into 911, is the first question that your 911 operator asks someone what their political party affiliation is?
It's a question that is never asked.
It's never asked. So, Mr. District Attorney, when you're thinking about prosecuting a case, do you ask people what their political party affiliation is?
No.
Okay, you don't. So if the cops aren't asking what the political party affiliation is, and the person that's going to prosecute somebody isn't asking what the political party affiliation is, don't you think that Governor Evers and President Biden and Vice President Harris should stop asking those questions? There's no way, it's statistically impossible, that they magically remove the 91 plus executive actions from President Trump, like just happenstance. Oops, they all had to deal with the border. Now we have this crisis. We've had 200,000 plus Americans die of fentanyl poisoning, right? It's actually about 300 a day. Imagine a jumbo jet crashing every single day that would be dealt with. So the Biden administration under the Harris stardom and Governor Evers right down the road here and his buddy Josh Call have politicized this, and our American citizens are dying because of it. It's pathetic. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Representative Stile for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The Biden-Harris administration's policies are having a real impact here in the state of Wisconsin. I think it's worth our time to reflect just on the case study of what's happened in Whitewater, Wisconsin, due to the policies of the Biden-Harris administration. I'll start with you. You've done, Mr. Curtis, you've done great research into this. You've seen a significant influx of migrants into Whitewater, as noted by the chief of police's letter that says he's estimating roughly 1,000 migrants. Do you think the 1,000 number is accurate?
Well, certainly in the records we reviewed, it's accurate, but I think I noted earlier, the sheriff, or excuse me, the police chief himself has noted that that is likely a conservative number. There were some individuals that challenged that estimate, and his response was, I think this is conservative, I'm paraphrasing, because again, that's based on the district population.
I agree, it's roughly, and it's based on the school district numbers, right?
Correct.
So what are the school district numbers that give rise to 1,000 estimate?
I think it's 200 to 300, I think in that range, and again, that fluctuates year to year.
A rough 200 to 300 person increase in a school district. I'll go to you, Mr. Kinson. How many students are in the school district of Whitewater? 1,200. So 1,200, you've seen an increase in roughly 200 students over the past 2 to 3 years?
2 years, it increased 50%.
An increase of 50% of English second language
Yes.
students, but an increase in
It was
absolute
200 to
numbers.
300, just roughly.
200 to 300 students in a school district of
1,200.
1,200. That is a very significant percent increase in the school district. And then in your testimony, you walk us through the real-world impact that this has had in the school district and on children. As you correctly noted, you noted that special needs students has held reasonably steady, about 20% state average of 14. Students who are economically disadvantaged has held reasonably steady, about 50% state average, 45, but a significant increase in the needs of English as a second language in the school district. And then at the same time, you note the correlation of overall academic achievement. You've been a longtime resident in the city of Whitewater. You have students that are there. Could you walk through how the school achievement has fallen in the community of Whitewater as a result of this influx?
Well, the example I gave in my testimony was, I think the perfect illustration of this is Lincoln, one of the elementary school with the highest proportion of ESL kids. So 5th grade last year, they had 25% of that class was ESL. 80% of that class was not reading at grade level in English.
So I think this is really important. So let's just dive into Lincoln Elementary in the school district of Whitewater. 25% of the students are English as a second language, but 80% of the 5th graders are not reading at a 5th grade level.
That's right.
And so does that mean that not only is there a challenge to those students who English is a second language, but really that is impacting all the students in the classroom? Is that your understanding?
Yeah, well, there's no mystery to this, right? If you go to the Wisconsin DPI website, there are 3 drivers, like I said. It's special needs kids, economically disadvantaged, and ESL. That's it. You can determine what a school's outcome is going to be based on that. As you raise one, right, the test scores are going to drop. It's invariable. And it's not just Wisconsin or Whitewater, it's across the country.
So every mom and dad who has a child in the Whitewater School District is being negatively impacted by the Biden-Harris administration border policies, by the Biden-Harris administration catch and release policies. That is directly impacting every student in the Whitewater School District. And when we extrapolate that out and we look statewide and nationwide, it's actually impacting almost everyone. And it uniquely impacts hardworking families in school districts that are not uniquely affluent. Moms and dads who have unlimited cash flow find ways to take care of their children. They drive to another school district. You noted in your testimony, some people drive to Elkhorn School District. Some people move to school districts or send their children to private schools with their own resources.
Or better yet, they don't come to Whitewater, right? That's the other dynamic I didn't talk about. If you're a parent and you care about your kids, you're not moving to Whitewater. That's the sorry truth of it. We had it's a university town. When I grew up, all the professors' kids went to Whitewater. Now they don't.
I grew up 20 minutes away. I know the city well, and the impact that the Biden-Harris administration policies are having in Whitewater is really just an example of the horrific policy impact that this is having across our state and across our country. This is why securing the U.S.-Mexico border is absolutely essential, not just for all the students in the community of Whitewater, but for students across our state. Cognizant of my time, I'd go on and dive into some of the drug trafficking issues that we've seen in Whitewater as well. But Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields, and I'll recognize Representative Grothman for his question.
Thanks. First, a little comment. I've been down on the border many times. And one of the things you hear if you talk to Border Patrol or the people who have to analyze or interview the people coming across is all the sexual assaults going on at the southern border. That is one of the prices that people have to pay for this open border policy. I again and again hear, and I talked to the woman last time I was down there who did examine everybody, and she told me, yeah, it's something we see all the time. So that's one of the prices that has to be paid by the women of this current situation. And you hear again and again they're putting even young girls on the pill because they expect they'll be sexually assaulted, which is just almost beyond belief. There's the border. Now, we don't have any Democrats here today, but if they were here, what they say is, well, sure, that there have been crimes committed by some people here illegally, but it's no large amount, or it's no more than the native-born population. I have talked to many judges, other DAs from my district prior to this hearing today, and one of the things I hear is that nobody knows, really, I don't know how anyone can make that statement, because nobody knows how many crimes in this country are being committed by illegals. If I go to one of the state prisons of my district, they have no idea how many people in that prison are here illegally. If I talk to somebody, how many people in your jail, county people, are here illegally, they have no idea. If I say last year in the United States there were 15,000 murders, how many were committed by illegals, nobody knows. I'd like to ask, I guess, both Sheriff Schmidt and District Attorney Tony, does anybody keep track of how many crimes in this country are committed by illegals, or is that just a number, despite the blizzard of paperwork that is required out of Washington, nobody knows?
I think you're right on par with what you're saying. We really don't know. Mr. McClintock asked me a percentage. I had to guess because I don't know how many people are committing crimes in our areas. I'm unique in my county because I have a holding facility for immigration. So we have the ability to, once they're booked in, we're able to identify if they're supposed to be here or not. But I'm one of very, very few across the country that have that ability. And most of the time when they get booked in until a couple days later, even I don't know that. So there's no way for us to even know that.
District Attorney Tony, if we talk about the number of murders, fatality by drunk driving, whatever, in last years, does anybody in Fond du Lac County tell us what percentage of serious crimes are committed by illegals?
Most of the crimes that come in, we don't know the immigration status of somebody. When we look at the border crisis, we see crime that's related to people coming here illegally and crime related to the drugs that are being done by American citizens.
And if you don't know in Fond du Lac County, for sure nationwide,
Well, there's a reason every judge reads an immigration warning in state court when there's a conviction. It doesn't matter if they're a citizen or not. The court is supposed to read that because we simply don't always know the immigration status.
Okay, do we have a special problem when it comes to people here, immigrants coming here, in that the victims are reluctant to report crimes to law enforcement, in part because there's a kind of a solidarity in ethnic groups? Is that a problem?
We see challenges with reporting crime if somebody is afraid they could be deported or otherwise removed from the country, where they may be not willing to.
And even if they're here legally, there is some solidarity, right, Sheriff
Yes.
Schmidt? There's solidarity in saying, no, we're not gonna turn Jimmy in for the sexual assault.
And there's cultural issues as well, that sometimes they won't cooperate with law enforcement because of their culture or because of the potential crime that's being investigated.
Okay, and do we have another problem, which people mention, particularly from the Latin American culture, in which people are giving different last names at different times, depending upon whether they're arrested? This is a special problem we maybe don't have with American, but people who grow up in that culture, you know, all of a sudden one day it's Morales Rodriguez, the next day it's Rodriguez Morales. Is that a problem?
Different last names, different first names, different birth dates, different everything, yes.
And we'll run criminal histories, and we'll see a list of aliases at times where it becomes difficult to track and match some of those records.
Do we have another problem, and I think District Attorney Tony, you kind of mentioned this, that people, perhaps victims of human trafficking, may be threatened with, we're going to turn you in and you might be deported, which is another challenge for law enforcement that you don't have with the native born. Is that true?
We do have challenges with those that are in the country illegally. There is a U visa system to try and help make sure we can have those witnesses or victims here, but that gets slammed with people applying that shouldn't even be applying, taking spaces away from those victims that we need here.
Is that true?
Yes, absolutely, I think it's true.
Do we have another problem? There's a cultural difference between people coming here and the native born. Is it accurate to say that maybe in other cultures, drunk driving is not to be taken as seriously as it is in this country?
I don't think I can speak to that.
I don't know the particular cultures, but I'm sure there is some aspect of that.
Okay. Same thing following up with regard to sex with a minor. I think maybe is it accurate to say that, you know, in this country, maybe we'd be alarmed if a 14 or 15-year-old gal was involved, you know, sexual activity. Perhaps in other countries, it's not considered quite as big a deal.
Well, you know, I just had a exchange with a social worker where we were dealing with the underage sex, and the social worker described it as a cultural difference. And one of the challenges that we see when people are coming here illegally, they're not looking at what our laws are before coming here. That's, I think, something that we routinely see that happens.
Okay. Same thing with regard to perhaps physical abuse in domestic relationships. Is there another maybe a little cultural difference there?
Well, one of the cases that I referenced, it's a domestic violence case, a brutal stabbing that we have set for trial in November, so I don't want to get into much of the details, but we do see those challenges.
Okay.
As do we.
That's true. Okay. Well, there was a lot of good questions to get in there. I guess I'll have to give the rest of the time back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for those excellent questions. Appreciate it very much. If everyone's questions have been asked and answered, that will conclude today's hearing. We thank all of our witnesses for appearing before the committee. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witnesses or additional materials for the record. Without objection,
all right.
hearing is adjourned.
So that wasn't too bad. We only had to pause it a few times, or pause it. The internet connection dropped 3 times. The first time was before the hearing started, so we're not gonna. That doesn't count. We're gonna say it dropped 2 times. Or, you know, part 2 and 3 are the real substance of this one. This is it. This was the last official hearing before the election, not before the new year. Some stuff happens, you know, in the second half of November. But yeah, Undersecretary of Commerce. Yes. So yeah, that was it. This was, for people that were just joining us, this was about the way that the southern border is being managed and its impact on a unlikely place like Wisconsin, which is much closer to the Canadian border than it is to the southern border. They're still seeing a lot of gang activity coming up through the southern border, landing in their state. So that was like the brunt of this, right? And the families that were affected by fentanyl. Fentanyl really stole the show here, not in a good way. It's almost unexplainable, right? So it doesn't make Wi-Fi. I'm hardwired, Alex. I'm still dropping. The connection still drops. So yeah. The fentanyl, the flow of fentanyl is really, I think, the most obvious way that it's really reaching into everybody's lives, right? Everybody knows somebody that's a kid in college who's experimenting with drugs, or has a neighbor whose son's a little bit of the neighbor's kid, let's say, experiments with drugs. It could be anybody, right? So and as it's come up in hearings before, it used to be, and just in podcasts in general, it used to be that if you were addicted to something, even say heroin or in that domain of like really bad addictions, if you overdosed, you still had a second, third, or fourth chance. With fentanyl, you got one chance, and if you overdose, that's it. It could be your first time. You're one of the families, I think it sounded like his son was a college freshman. A kid, 17, 18-year-old kid, thought he was taking a hydrocodone, or I don't know what they're called, but one of the lesser, of the pills that are addictive, or one of the lower strength ones, and that was it. That was it for him. It's very sad. I know there's also been hit and runs. People have died in hit and runs. That's happened. I know somebody who that happened to. So it's affecting not just Texas, right? That was the border state. It used to be the border state, but now every state has been transformed into a border state. And that was really the purpose of this hearing, I think. So, and again, no Democrats showed up on the congressional side of things. I don't believe they had any witnesses either. So, and they're allowed to invite them, but they didn't show up. So, whatever you think, even if you think this was a publicity stunt, right? You can show up and say that. To not even show up, and to know that these fentanyl deaths are happening and that these gangs are coming up through the southern border, negligence. That's not doing their duty. So, in my opinion, you got less than 2 more weeks of this nonsense, and hopefully, we come out the other side of this bigger, faster, and stronger. As I was typing in the chat last night, there was a really great. It was a rally, and Tulsi had earlier in the day come out as a Republican, and Tucker was on stage with Tulsi, and RFK wandered on stage, and Trump was there too. It was a real moment. It was very powerful. Was that last night? Yes, that was last night. Patients' medication that make their health worse. El Rey, so nasty. I can't answer that question. My wife's grandfather was one of the people in the nursing homes right when COVID hit, and the protocol they put him on in the hospital is ultimately what killed him. So that was a protocol. It was a ventilator and fentanyl, and he was a World War II vet. The man survived World War II. Best generation, only to succumb to a bad protocol. I don't know why. I don't know the motive behind these things, but yeah, big cash money influences them. And it's, I don't know, yeah, at the end of the day, I think it has something to do with that, but I don't even know exactly. Like, is the nurse administering the fentanyl and putting him on the ventilator? Is she, like, reaping the profits there? I mean, what is the motivation for her? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would like to do the Rogan-Trump interview, but I have a feeling that that's going to be, licensed in some way where I could run afoul of copyright infringement, YouTube's copyright system. Like I said, most of the stuff I do is in public domain. Some of it isn't, but most of it is. There's an argument to be made that the Trump-Rogan interview is of national importance. But the thing is that YouTube doesn't have to follow, the laws, like the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is really an instruction set for the government, not private corporations. Now I can argue all day, but if YouTube wants to take me down, or someone wants to take me down, they're gonna take me down hard. Oh no, yeah, El Rat Nasty. That was harder for my wife. Thank you, Dana. Thank you very much. Dana, very pretty too. I can see your thumbnail from here. Yeah. So it was hard. He's the patriarch of my wife's side of the family. That's the last Freudian slip I'm gonna make today. I'm gonna call it before I do it again. Yes. What did the MSNBC lies, Matt? I have to go way up to even find John. Oh, it was deleted. Yeah. It's funny. Yep. All right, everybody. I'll leave y'all to it. Fight brain rot and subscribe. That's the new thing. I like that. It used to be knowledge is power. Subscribe. Fight brain rot. Subscribe. It's a similar message. So we're gonna go with it. Everybody, take care. See you soon. I'll be back as soon as I can. Hopefully, the internet is more stable in the days to come. Yeah, I don't know. I'll do a little bit of research on the subject there. See what I can get away with. I think I remember there was like a UFC where someone was watching it and the reflection on their glasses was intentional, right, to show everybody what was actually happening. I think he might have gotten in trouble, but that's anecdotal. I have to look up case law. I'll do a little bit of research. If that's it, everybody, I love you. I'll take care. Be well. I'll see you all soon. Adios, Matt. Thank you.